Hey guys, very good morning. Today we are going to discuss the character study Sarai or Sarah. Meaning of name: Sarai meant my princess. Sarah means princess. She was to be not only Abraham's princess but the princess of a large race of people. Her ancestry and family life: Abraham's half sister, daughter of his father Terah, but not his mother. When and where she lived: apparently she first lived in Ur of the Chaldees and later went with her husband Abraham to Canaan. Place in history: when you look at Genesis chapter 11 verse 30, Genesis chapter 12 and Genesis chapter 17 verse 19, we can see place in history. Special traits: she was barren, beautiful in appearance, recipient of the promises of God, and protected by God. What are the weaknesses of Sarah? Lack of faith, first one, and second was schemer, and third one is adultery. We know we have an idol when we are willing to sin in order to get something we want. The fourth one is blame shifting. Fifth one is harshness, and seventh one is lie to cover sin, and eighth one is jealous. What are strengths? What are the strengths? First one is apparently submissive to husband, and the second one is praises to God, and third one is laughs a lot. Fourth one, consider him faithful who had promised, and fifth one is fearlessness. How she died? She died at 127 at Kiryat Arba, and no details given of her death. What are the lessons we can learn from Sarah's life? First one, God called Abraham to leave country and family to go to strange place. There was no question that Sarah would follow her husband. If God calls husband, naturally he is calling the wife also. And the second point, in chapter 12, Abraham gives Lot the choice of land. Lot chose the best land, but ultimately Abraham prospered because of his generosity, while Lot suffered for his selfishness. Sometimes our husbands make decisions that don't make sense to us and that we don't like, but we need to trust God to lead through our husbands and follow with good attitudes. Sometimes the end result will be prosperity, sometimes it will be poverty, but in either event God will use those decisions to train us in godliness. The third point is in Genesis chapter 12 verse 17, we see that Abraham tries to protect his own skin by the lie. A half-truth is a lie that Sarah was his sister. He didn't really consider Sarah in this but made a totally selfish decision. But this verse tells us that because of Sarah, God sent plagues on Pharaoh. God protects us even when our husbands make sinful, incorrect decisions. And the next one, in Genesis chapter 16 verse 1, Sarah followed the custom of her culture and suggested that Abraham enter into an immoral relationship with her maid. Following sinful cultural ideas does not produce good fruit. By him following her suggestion, there was disharmony and jealousy in the home, and the race that gave us the Muslim religion was begun. The next point, another life lesson from that verse is that God had promised a child. God had promised. She was impatient and unbelieving of God's promises, so she took matters into her own hands to try to make things happen. The result was a mess. The next point, Genesis chapter 16 verse 5. Sarah blame shifted Abraham's interaction with Hagar. Yes, he could have said no and not had sexual relations with Abraham, but he was just following her suggestion. Before we make suggestions to our husbands, we need to think through clearly, realizing the influence we have on them. Count the cost ahead of time and then make only suggestions that will encourage our husbands to glorify God with their lives. And the next point, Genesis chapter 17 verse 15 to 20. God promised that Sarah would be the mother of Abraham's child, and that promise came to pass. We must not underestimate God. He can do wondrous and mighty things. It's a mistake to think that God can't do things, especially things He has promised to do. The next point, Genesis chapter 20 verse 1 to 6. God can take care of us even when our husbands fail to. The next point, Genesis chapter 21 verse 1. God always keeps His promises even when they look impossible. Which promises of God look impossible to you? Isn't it? The next point, Genesis chapter 22. God's dealing with Abraham and Isaac. Sarah is not mentioned at all. God does not involve us in all of His dealings with our husband and kids. We don't need to be involved in everything sometimes. We need to sit back, shut up, and let God work. And Hebrews chapter 11, faith produces great results in our lives. What could and what God do in, for, and through us if we only trusted Him for it. The next point, 1 Peter chapter 3 verse 6. Several times in Sarah's life, she had good reason to be afraid. But this verse intimates that she was not afraid, that she followed fearlessly. Many times in our lives, those who lead us will lead us places we don't want to go to, do things that are hard for us to do. But we need to follow without fear. I hope you can understand the character study of Sarah. God bless you. Thank you.